Hello, everybody. My name is Becky Draper, and I am a Vedic astrologer and Ayurveda health coach, and I help people align with the rhythms and cycles in nature. And today we're going to talk about Mars moving into Aries. So Mars moved into Aries on May 11th. And Mars is the planet that represents war. And anytime that you're in like a time of war, which seems to be much more common than not, you want to look at like what Mars is doing. And when Mars was just in Pisces, I predicted that their war would kind of calm down, and with Saturn being in Pisces, it would create a kind of like a stalemate or a stalled situation. And I talked about how when Saturn and Mars came together, it kind of created a little bit of like a pressure cooker. And I've even been feeling kind of like a pressure cooker happening in my own life in certain ways. So we also want to think about a lot of this stuff on like an individual level as well. So Mars represents, in our personal lives, it represents like our drive and our will. It's the third chakra stuff. And so it's our confidence and self-esteem too. And a lot of the time we will direct our Mars energy onto other people. And so we'll try to like control other people or tell other people what's best for them. And what we really want to do is direct our Mars energy towards ourselves. So like the only battle that we want to fight is like that internal battle, and like turning Mars energy inward. So anytime that we're working with Mars energy, we're thinking a little more about like the sattvic or higher version of Mars, which would be like the martial artist. And I mean, there's even like a time and place for war. And, you know, I don't like believe in war, and I am like all about peace. But at the same time, all things, we live in this dual world and all things exist. And so there is even like a time and a place for war. So we're looking at when Mars moves from Pisces into Aries, we're looking at it from like the perspective on a global level, and the perspective of war. We're talking about going from this situation where things are more stalled out. And like another thing I also used in what I was hearing these words nonstop in the media was the words like illusion, confusion, stalemate was even used a bunch, falsehoods. And these are all things that are very Piscean and Saturn. And so that's how we know that these things were actually even happening, is because the way that people were even describing the war was like through these words that we used to describe Saturn and we used to describe Pisces. So I thought that was really interesting. And so I predicted that would happen. And then I said, but once we go into Aries, that will be like the triggering point. And so once we go into Aries, and that is on May 11th, then we're going to start to see things spice up a lot more. And people with Aries is ruled by Mars. And so Mars is really powerful here. And it makes it so that Mars has more of like an authority in the war itself and is more like involved in the war. And then it is also like a way of also, so since Aries is the first constellation in the cycle, it shows like the beginning, and it also shows, it represents like a newborn or like a toddler. And Mars is like the toddler going to war. And so you're gonna see a lot of these military people acting like toddlers. I can think of one very specific one that will act like a toddler. But that is what Mars energy in Aries is, especially when we're dealing with the lower forms and we're not dealing with people who are more sattvic and turning their Mars energy inward. We're dealing with people who are directing their Mars energy outward, because that's what war is. So Um, once in Aries, I think that that is going to really like start to amplify the war. And I predicted this already, and we can already see it happening. So I'm not probably seeing anything that profound. Although I did say that would happen, and it was almost like exactly on May 11th, because I'm filming this a couple days later. It's May 13th. So it was like May 11th. It was almost like the exact day where it was like war starts back up and talks of war starting back up. And so I do think that that's inevitable. And Mars will be here until June 20th. So there's a lot of time where there could be a lot of heated action that has some long-term results, especially when Mars was just with Saturn and they together created like the pressure cooker that's about to burst. I think that Saturn being like the ruler of our karma and consequences, and I've really been also thinking a lot about Saturn and Pisces, and Saturn really is kind of like the inverse reality. It's like shows us the mirror, and that's really what karma kind of is like the dual world where it shows us like the inverse or the mirror, the shadow. We can call lots of different things, but in Pisces it's almost like kind of showing us like the Joker or like the Fool, or like the part of ourselves that are foolish and silly, and kind of making things look like making everything look a little bit clowny. And that is what I think Saturn in Pisces is. It shows you where a lot of the things that we believed were actually just illusions. Like, for example, I think that we all believed that the US military was, a lot more competent than it maybe actually is. And they had military plans to go into Iran, and they thought that they were going to be able to just go in there and it was going to be no big deal. It was going to be just like Venezuela and, go in, take it away. And when that didn't happen, they really underestimated their opponent. For one, like, we learned that Iran is a lot more powerful than we had thought. And it just shed light that America is not the superpower that it once was, or if it ever was that. And it might have been kind of an illusion. And just because we put a bunch of money into the military and we went out and paraded around and went and overthrew a bunch of weak governments, making it look like we were strong, when push came to shove and we went against an opponent that actually had some strategic plans that they actually posted and said, if you attack us, this is exactly what we're going to do. And so none of this was a secret. They just didn't think they'd be able to do it, I guess. And so it exposed the American military as not being as strong as people thought. And that if you fight back against the American military, then you might actually do better than just letting them come in and overthrow you. So, I don't know. I really think that illusion of Saturn and Pisces is playing into this war now, because that energy, that stalemate, was really like brewing for a while. And now the top's gonna come off, and I really think it's going to expose a lot of this like world order to be kind of an illusion, and there's going to be a realignment that happens, and there will be a correction, and people will come to terms with the new reality eventually. But it's just going to take time for everyone to catch up to that. And I think that a lot of that reality check is going to come when we have the next eclipse in August. And I think that will be when things really actually start to affect everybody, and everybody's feeling the pinch of this war. And that's when, that's really ultimately when reality will set in. So I'm gonna leave this here because we'll talk more about what happens when Mars goes into Taurus as it gets closer. But this is like Taurus is a very grounding energy, and Venus rules Taurus. And so this could soften some of that war energy. So there is hope. It's not all bad, but just be prepared that there might be some explosive warlike behavior happening. And then in your personal life, just remember to not direct your battles towards others, and to the only battles you want to engage in are your own internal battles. So Satnam, if you want to get a reading, message me. I would love for you to know more about where Saturn's at in your chart. You can understand what it means for you when Saturn's moving through Pisces, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.